That's Melissa. I want to start with Georgia. This past week, the Brookings Institution published a 107-page report of the potential criminal investigation in Georgia, writing, quote, Trump's post-election conduct in Georgia leaves him at substantial risk of possible state charges predicated on multiple crimes. That post-election conduct continues. Last night, Trump also revealed he also asked the governor for a special election. Just last week, he sent the state a letter asking Georgia to decertify the 2020 results. So how do all of these individual actions play into Trump's bigger plot to overturn the will of the people, Melissa?
Well, this 107-page report is something of a barn burner. I mean, literally throwing the book at him. And it's a blueprint that the prosecutors can use for going forward in analyzing and investigating and ultimately prosecuting the former president for what happened in advance of the events of January 6th and what led to January 6th. It outlines a series of not only state-level election-related crimes, but also just general crimes that this behavior ostensibly falls under, including Georgia's racketeering, influence, corrupt acts statute, which is its RICO statute. So generally, we normally think of this as something that deals with organized crime, but they talk about in the Georgia statute this kind of behavior, organizing with other people and working with other people. Rudy Giuliani is named, other folks are named, to actually influence and to do corrupt and criminal acts. So this is not simply about this election, like it can go further, and as it gets investigated, the scope of this may expand further. But it's critically important that all of this is investigated, whether at the federal level or at the state level, to understand exactly the threat that we're dealing with, because it's not simply the acts of one person. We are seeing now, as you noted, throughout the country, efforts to have state legislatures take more power in the electoral process, place electoral officials like the Secretary of State in place that can be removed only through the efforts of the governor or other party officials, so that in time these sorts of things can actually be more effective than they were in 2020 and 2021.
So, Waj, as always, Melissa got it exactly right, which is that this isn't just about Trump. This is about the ways that Republicans are working to undermine future elections. Congressman Jamie Raskin had this to say this morning on MSNBC. Take a listen.
The Republican Party is a minority party. It's a shrinking party. It literally has no platform coming out of its 2020 convention. Their whole strategy is to try to keep people from voting and using every anti-democratic trick in the book, from gerrymandering to the filibuster to right-wing judicial activism to these election fraudits in order to stop democracy from working.
You hear the list there, Waj, at the end, all of the tactics that they're employing. How do you see those building upon one another as part of a larger scheme to maintain power?
We have to call it for what it is. The end game is fascism. It's going to be minority rule, white Christian supremacy. And if people think I'm being hysterical here, just step back and look at the evidence, right? A majority of Republicans voted not to certify the election. There was a big lie that Biden lost. A majority of Republicans believe it. Thanks to Donald Trump, there was a violent insurrection that overtook our Capitol. 5 people died. The violent insurrectionists, the criminals Ashley Babbitt, are now seen as martyrs. More evidence is coming out now that Donald Trump pressured the Justice Department, right, to go along with the scheme. We just found out the 6-point blueprint that was written by an attorney, a Republican attorney, that gave them the blueprint for the coup. We have the audio recording of him pressuring Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. He publicly admitted at the rally yesterday that he pressured Governor Kemp. I love it when criminals admit their crimes. And now you're seeing this bogus, fraudulent audit. It's not even an audit, it's fraud in Arizona. And what we're seeing now is it's going to get repeated because you want to radicalize the base, you want to weaponize the base, you want to promote disinformation, you want to degrade our faith and trust in the election. And whenever a Republican loses in 2022 or 2024, they're going to follow the playbook, like Larry Elder tried to do in California. The end result is going to be a constitutional crisis. It's going to be a political crisis. And what Republicans are going to do, as Jamie Raskin outlined, is use all these measures to ensure minority rule. It is a pathway towards fascism.
So, Mariana, in that sort of complicated sweater that Waj just wove there, I want to pull one thread, which is the January 6th insurrection. So the House Select Committee investigating the insurrection issued a round of subpoenas this past week to 4 members of Trump's inner circle. Political reports the committee also want to hear from rioters who have already pled guilty. What are you watching for as the committee enters this new, quote, aggressive phase?
Yeah, this committee is really trying to wrap up quickly. That is likely meaning in the next year or so, because if you do think about it, we're talking about minority majorities here in the House. They could potentially lose that majority, and it wouldn't be unlikely if a majority leader, Kevin McCarthy, just completely undoes this committee in 2023. So it's something that they are really trying to get through, and they've been working really quickly. They've really only been established for several months, already issuing letters asking people, technology companies to withhold information. And as you mentioned, already also issuing subpoenas. And they are to people who were in Trump's inner circle, including Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. They all want to know, and from them, and also potentially from other staff at the White House and potentially Republican leaders as well, who was communicating with the White House? What were those conversations about? How much did Trump know in those hours when the insurrection was happening and members of Congress reportedly pleading for him to take action and really call for his supporters to stop? So they want to get as many answers as possible. And it's likely we will start to see a number of closed door testimony, so nothing public, but at least a number of these people in Trump's orbit coming to Capitol Hill next month, or potentially trying to defy subpoenas as well.
Waj, I want to just zoom out for a moment, because the embrace of lies about the election from Trump supporters, from the Republicans, mirrors the battle against disinformation that we're seeing when it comes to COVID-19. What do you see as the connection between the two?
I mean, it's the same infrastructure and ecosystem that seeks to radicalize and weaponize the base to make them to basically unleash them as a force against the establishment. The establishment is democratic rule. The establishment is science. Anything and everything that could be weaponized for their culture war, whether it's cancel culture, whether it's Dr. Seuss, whether it's masks, whether it's vaccines, is being employed right now. Let's just look at Loudoun County, close by to me in Virginia. It first started off as against CRT and then became against transgender rights, and now it's become against masks and vaccines. So you have a radicalized, weaponized mob, an army for Trump that can and will be unleashed by the conservative movement to what they say is tyrannical rule by the deep state, which is a white supremacist theory that says all of us are part and parcel of an organization. We have the mark of the beast to oppress everyone else and to quote unquote replace them. A white supremacist theory, Alicia, that is now mainstreamed and talked about openly on Fox News by Tucker Carlson. And so what you're seeing is a mob and an army to degrade our democracy and to be unleashed against the majority. This is why all of it's connected, and it's part of the ecosystem that does not care about facts, science, truth. And that's why, case in point, look at Arizona. They don't care. They said, I don't care about the facts. I don't care about the results. We believe in this disinformation. We believe in the big lie. And we're going to go forth in Texas and do the whole same thing over again to degrade our democracy and to radicalize more folks. And the people who are elected know better, but they realize that the mob now controls the GOP. It's a very dangerous situation we're in right now.
Melissa, I have a question for you about the literal mob, which is that there was new reporting from the Times about an FBI informant's interaction with the Proud Boys on January 6th. It reads, quote, in the informant's version of events, the Proud Boys, famous for their street fights, were largely following a pro-Trump mob consumed by a herd mentality rather than carrying out any type of pre-planned attack. Does that complicate the DOJ's attempt to file conspiracy charges against the Proud Boys?
Possibly, not definitely, but possibly. I mean, it's the case here that the fact that this particular informant didn't seem to have an organized plan that he was following and that he was relating back to his FBI handler suggests that maybe he was not involved in any longstanding conspiracy. But the thing about conspiracy is that it doesn't necessarily need to be long-lived or deeply premeditated. You can form a conspiracy with another person simply by agreeing in a moment to do something in furtherance of an illegal act. So a conspiracy can form on the fly, and that may have been what happened. As long as two members of the Proud Boys or some other group say to each other, hey, let's storm the Capitol, let's go tear some stuff up, you've got a conspiracy to commit a criminal act, invading a building, disrupting public events, or destroying property while there. And so a conspiracy can happen in lots of different ways. I think what needs to be looked at here is what is the scope of the behavior that happened during this time? Who are the individuals who are involved in? And more particularly, what is the level of intelligence that's going back between these informants and the FBI? Because that, to me, seems the most glaring aspect of this entire story, that there was communication between this informant and his handler that wasn't then related back or even looked at in determining the level of risk on January 6th.